video guide for Class 2 Assignment 2, and in this assignment we're going to be making 3 maps. The first map is going to be at a global scale, the second at a regional scale, and the third one is going to be at a much more local scale, and we're going to be using strictly polygons for that map. For this first set, we're going to be working with earthquake points, and our deliverable is going to be 2 earthquake maps. And to get started, we're going to be using natural earth data, and we're also going to be using the USGS National Hazards Program data. Some of this you had from Class 1, and you can certainly use that data that you used in Class 1 and just recycle it into this mapping. The other option that I'll show here in just a second is to actually go get more updated data straight from USGS. We're going to be orienting to ArcGIS. We're going to be connecting our data, and then after we connect the data, we'll be mapping latitude and longitude points. We're going to run what's called an SQL expression to select out features, and then we're going to develop our map layers, symbolize them, produce a final map layout, and finally export the assignment itself out. So we have several different steps, and let's go ahead and get started here. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that we have ArcGIS installed, and I have it open, so I'm ready to go here. But before we do anything, we want to make sure that we have some data to work with. So for this assignment, we're going to be using natural earth data, and we would have worked with this data in our lab to prepare for this second week assignment. But here's where you can actually get the data if you need to. So you would click on get the data, and there is a Natural Earth Quick Start kit, which is 165 megabytes, which provides most of the themes and layers that Natural Earth consists of. And it also gives you a ArcMap MXD document, as well as a QGIS document here. So that's a good place to start. I also have a link in the assignment that will let you download all that data off of Natural Earth, and it's a little bit quicker, so I would recommend that. And we're also going to be using the USGS earthquake data, so we'll be getting our data from here in just a moment. So let's do this. Before we go to USGS, let's just open up ArcMap and get ourselves situated in terms of our base layers. So our first map is going to be at a global scale. We're not going to be using any raster data. We're just going to be using vectors. And your layout may be slightly different than mine, but essentially you should have a table of contents. And if you don't see your table of contents, you can just access it right up here at the top bar. There's the table of contents. You should also have a catalog tab. So here's the Arc Catalog tab. If you don't see that, you can access it up from the top by clicking on Catalog, and it will make it active. We also want to make sure that we're using search. So again, if you click on search here, you can type things in, which we'll be doing in a moment. The other option is to go up to the top bar and click on it, and that'll get you the search. Okay, so let's go ahead and connect to the data. That's the first thing we need to do. And if I look onto the desktop here, I'm just going to collapse my assignment steps. If we get to the desktop, we can see that I have the Natural Earth Quick Start downloaded at 157 megabytes, and I need to just go ahead and extract that or open it up. So I can, if you have 7-zip, you can open it up with 7-zip, or you can just say extract all. And I'm working on the desktop. This whole assignment will be on the desktop. As soon as I open up the folder, what I want to do is make a new folder that I'm just going to call my assignment 2. So I'm just going to go ahead and say new folder, and I'll just call it, you could have your last name in assignment 2, or I'm just going to say assignment 2. This is my global folder. This is where everything's going to go. So I'm going to have other data sources coming into this folder, but I want to make sure that Natural Earth is inside that folder. So this is kind of my master folder right here, and that's what I really need to connect to at the type level. So let's go ahead and get rid of, we're just going to put Natural Earth in the trash now. So we'll just delete that, and that's out of our way, so we won't see that anymore. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to Art Catalog. I'm going to make that active, and I'm going to make a folder connection. And the way that we do that is this, up at the top of Catalog, there's a folder with a plus, black plus. We click on that, and we're going to get to our location, which is assignment 2. We click on it and say OK. And that creates under folder connections something called assignment 2. I'm going to go ahead and remove everything else so I don't get confused. So I'm going to say disconnect folder to the desktop, disconnect folder to Natural Earth, and I'll leave the documents to ArcGIS. I'll leave that alone, that's fine. So now I know under folder connections, if I'm trying to figure out where my data is located, it's always going to be in assignment 2. That's where I'm placing everything. So I open this up and I go into packages, and that's where all the Natural Earth data is located. And let's just kind of look at that folder structure for a moment. So the way that this is organized is we start with a MXD. Remember, we're working in what's called untitled MXD right now, which is not the Natural Earth Quick Start MXD itself. I would suggest actually staying out of this and just opening up your new MXD separate of the data. I think it'll just be easier in terms of getting to the data that we need for this assignment quickly and easily. Now, we have different scales that are represented here. So we would have talked in class about map scale, and 50M in Natural Earth reflects a scale of 1 to 50 million units. Okay, so that's going to be a relatively large scale mapping compared to 110 million map units. So these 110 folders, they are at a more global scale, whereas the 50 meter is more regional, and then also the 10 million, excuse me, not 50 meter, 50 million, and then also the 10 million is going to be much more of a large scale mapping. So for this first map, we're going to be operating within these two folders that are at 110 million map units. So the first thing we want to do before we actually bring in any data, we know that we're going to be using cultural and physical at 110 million units. We want to set up our map page before we do anything else. So for this first assignment, we want it to be landscape, and we want it to be 11 by 17. Remember, this first mapping, we're not doing a lot of GIS analysis, so we're not going to be spending a lot of time in what's known as data view. It's more going to be in the layout view itself, because the whole purpose of the assignment is to learn how to create maps. So our whole purpose in this particular mapping is to produce a map. So a large part of what we do in this assignment is going to be in one view, which is layout view. And the first thing I need to do is I need to set that up. And the way that I do that is if I go up to File and I say Page and Print Setup, this is where I set all that up. In your name of your printer, yours will probably be named something else, but you want to look for something that's printing to PDF. Okay, so I have a Microsoft Print to PDF. I also have a Foxic Phantom PDF. You basically you want something that's not going to print to a fax, or you want something that's going to give you a PDF. So I'm going to point it to this PDF printer. And on our page size, we have two options. There's a box up at the top, and there's also a box down here at the bottom. We can use the printer page settings, and we would set those up here, or we can click off this and just go ahead and force it down in this bottom box, which is kind of what I like to do. So we're going to click on landscape, and in this case it's going to be a tabloid. I say OK, and we don't see anything happening because we're in data view right now. So if we go down into the lower left-hand corner, we'll see two little icons, and we just need to make sure that we're on the farthest right icon and click that on, and then we can actually see our layout page. I'm going to collapse our catalog here for a second. So now we can see the border of our page up at the top, and we can also see our active data frame, what's called the data frame. And for this assignment, we're going to place the data frame, we're going to span it all the way from edge to edge, which is called a full bleed. So I'm going to go from edge to edge. I'm going to have a title up towards the top, and then we'll place down on the bottom our map layout elements, and we'll walk through each one of those together. So our larger layout to this map is going to be horizontal, and it's going to have at the top a title, as I said, and also the elements are going to be down the bottom, separated very drastically. So that's one type of layout. There's many other types of map layouts. But for this assignment, what we really want to focus on is what are the key elements of a map. So the first element, obviously, is the actual data itself. So that's going to be sitting in this data frame called layers here. And right now, we don't have anything in it, and we can see in our table of contents, there's nothing there. If we make this active, so I'm in data view and I just clicked on the inside of it, I can do a right click, and I can go to properties. And under properties, I can set up how I want this framing to be. So if I wanted a really fancy line, I could go up to border and say I want a triple line. I could say apply, OK. And then I have a nice triple line. It's hard to see it at this level, but if we were to export it out, we would see it as a triple line. For this assignment, let's just go ahead and go to properties and just make a simple one stroke line. So it's a 1 point stroked line. And we'll get to the background in just a second, and we'll say apply, OK. So it's going to have a slight border to it. Now what we want to do is we want to start adding some data to this map. So we say add data, and at this point what we need to do is we need to navigate to our actual data, and that's why it's going to be under folder connections, because remember we made the connection through Arc Catalog already. So we go to folder connections, and we'll see it here. And we go into Natural Earth, Packages, and we want to get to our 110 cultural. Those are the actual boundaries of countries. And we can see we have admin boundaries, we have states, and these are all the boundaries of the country. So let's click on one of those and say add it. So this would be our base map here. And we have an option here where we could use this particular file as kind of our base map. But there's actually, for this map, there might be one better option. And I'm going to go ahead and go get that. So I go to Add Data, and I'm going to go into Physical instead of Cultural. Under Physical, there's actually a ocean feature. So if I click on Ocean and say Add It, this gives us kind of a polygon feature that does really well as a base map in certain instances. So I'm actually going to get rid of my countries. You can see it's sitting underneath it, and that works really well. I could do that, but really what I want to do is I want to have a base map for my earthquake mapping that's going to be really kind of stark between land and water, and that's all I really care about. So I can actually use this ocean as kind of a mask, and right now I just have white space as land. But what I could do if I want to is I can go back into my map frame, do a right click, and go to properties and actually change that background to be sort of a tan color for for land. So maybe I would make it gray at 10%, or I can make it actually a sand color. I'm going to do gray at 10% and see how that looks. And then for ocean, I can actually change the fill color to a nice blue. See if I can find one that's halfway decent. Has a little bit of contrast to it. I guess for this assignment I'll use this color. And I say no and say okay. So outline color is going to be no. And that gives me a nice kind of crisp, simple base here. I could obviously change that background color if I want to, but this should work out to get us started. We need to remember in our folder we were at 110 million map units, and up here at the top we can see that right now I'm at 1 to a map unit of 133 million. So I should probably be back into the million range. So I'm going to change that to 1 million, and I'll just put it in the zeros here. 1, 2, 3. So this is actually the scale that that particular feature was designed for being most optimum at 110 million map units. And we can see it almost scans nicely our 11 by 17 sheet in landscape format. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to zoom in or scale in just a little bit more. So I'm at 1 million right now, or 100 million right now. Let's go into and have it be 90 million. And we can see that we've zoomed in just a touch. Now I could zoom in real far if I went into, say, 50 million. That's more than I want to be. But if I just click on 90 million, that should set us up pretty good. So in this case, we can see across our map page all our countries pretty well. We're cutting off a little bit of our polar region, so maybe what we might want to do is bring this down just a little bit. There we go. And as I click and make this frame active, I can use my hand tool to kind of push around inside the map, and you can see that the frame itself stays stable while my base map changes around. Okay, once I get it kind of positioned where I would want it to be, I'm actually going to bring it down just a little bit here. That's pretty good. I'm clipping off the polar regions just a tad, but I'm really getting the central core of continents here and countries. So that looks pretty good to me. Once I'm happy with kind of the layout here, I have some space on the bottom. I also have some space on the top for a title. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually save my MXD. So up until this point, everything that we've done, we could lose immediately. So we want to actually, once we get to a point where we're happy with what we've mapped so far, we want to go ahead and pause and save it. So we go to File, Save As, and we're going to place it into our Assignment 2 folder. Okay, and we'll just put it right next to Natural Earth Quick Start, and we'll just call this, we can call it Class 2, Map 1, and we say save. And so we can always get back to the data path that we have set up. We can get back to this particular mapping instance based on that saved MXD. Now what we'll want to do is, since we like where we're at right here, we have a bleed outside the edge of the page. Okay, the map frame itself goes out just a little bit past the actual map page on the right hand side here. What we can do is we can actually bookmark this view. So when we do that, we go up to bookmarks and say create a bookmark, and I'm going to call this map frame map underscore frame view 1 for the first map, and say OK. So now if I all of a sudden mess this up, so I've been panning around my map and I have it way over in this corner here, I can go up to bookmarks and say map frame 1, and it's going to snap everything as I wanted it in the first place. Okay, so once we actually have our map frame on our page, let's just go over to data view real quickly. So in the lower left hand corner, we can snap it to data frame. And as we do that, we can see that we're in this whole completely other space here. And we could zoom in, we can zoom out, this is where we would be working with data if we were doing GIS analysis, which we'll be doing in the next few weeks. This is our working view. We're not really concerned about the final layout of the map that we're producing. All we're concerned about is what we actually have in table of contents and what we're doing in the mapping itself. So if we go back now to layout view, we can see that our views changed because we were in data view and we were moving around in data view. We can just simply go to bookmarks and say map frame view, and we're right back where we should be. So once we're in layout view, we're really thinking about making a map. What's this going to be actually printed as? What's it going to look like? Okay, so what we want to do, the first thing is actually place a title. So we go to insert and go to title, and it gives us a pretty boring text. I can go to properties and I can change this around. So here I might want to make it, actually let's make it this symbol, which is country 2, and maybe make it a 16 in bold and say OK. Apply it, say OK. It's a little bit small, it could be a little bit bigger. If I want to actually change the text component, what I can do is I can change this to a graphic, and once I change it to a graphic, then I can get into the text and update the text. So global earthquakes, maybe to date, or actually I should say from date to date. And then for your map, you would actually produce the from date to date, and we would say apply OK. Now I can always get rid of that and just start over if I want to. If I don't like it, I could just simply delete it and start over again. But here's, let's say I want to actually change the symbol and make it just a little bit bigger here. I can go to 18 size and say apply. Okay. So the point here is that we produce a title through inserting a title. After we insert it, then we can always change it to a graphic if we want to. Next thing, we want to have a source tag. So we insert and we say text. And when you insert text, it sticks it in the middle as a teeny tiny little feature, which tends to be really annoying. And to get rid of that, the second component is we want to have a source tag. So if we go up to insert and say text, it's going to place a little teeny tiny text element in the middle of your map. And sometimes it's hard to select this, so what you can do is you can turn off all your features, and then you'll see the bounding box for that text, and you can usually pull it out. And once it's pulled out, you can do a right click on it and go to properties and change the symbol around. So it's pretty small. I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger so we can see it, and say apply OK. And here's where you would put your source tag. So source natural earth, and then you can do a semicolon. We're also going to be using USGS hazards data. And if you have other layers, you can also add that into. And maybe I'll capitalize it here, source, and say apply OK. And this will go into our corner of our map. And the style of your text could be, you could have it italicized, or you could have it just a regular text if you want to. Okay. And again, just like the title, you can do properties, do a right click, and change around your symbol. So you could make this as fancy as you want it to be, you can also click on edit symbol here and work in formatted text, advanced text, and also masking. Okay, so we have a title, we have a source tag. We also want to, for this first map, we're going to also insert a north arrow. So the north arrow, we have different style types. And since we're dealing with new kind of modern data from the last, say, month or so for global earthquakes, we want to keep the style kind of modern probably. These are what are called cardinal roses, and the cardinal roses show all directions. There's also just a north arrow, and some of these north arrows are kind of slender and modern. I like those quite a bit, so I oftentimes will use something like this that's pretty clean and simple. Another one to use is, where are we, north arrow? These north arrows that just have a simple line with north work out pretty well. So something like, say, this is a nice arrow, really clean, simple. We can place this into one of the corners. Since we can look at our map features and tell that we have a north orientation, we don't really need a north arrow per se for this map. It's not absolutely required, but for this first mapping assignment, let's go ahead and include a north arrow just for practice. After we have these three elements, so we want to move on to inserting a scale bar. So we click on scale bar, and I'm going to pick out, I like these step scales a lot. So this is up to you. There's many different types, and I suggest that you explore them and decide what type that you like to work with, what makes sense for your sort of aesthetic sensibilities. You can say okay. And they all work pretty much the same. They have demarcations across the scale bar to represent different breaks in if it's going to be miles or feet. In this case, we probably want to choose kilometers or miles. That makes most sense for the scale of this map. We definitely don't want to show feet because we're dealing at a global scale. And to finesse this scale bar, what we can do is we can go to properties, and we can go into number of divisions and number of subdivisions. So let's see what happens if we bring down the number of divisions. So I'm going to bring it down from 4 to 2 and say OK. You can see that I lose some of the actual annotation on the bottom of the scale bar. I'll go back to properties and bring it down to subdivisions 2. So instead of 4, 4, now it's 2, 2, and say OK. And we can see that we just basically have 2 spots along our scale bar of demarcation. So for this global scale bar, we probably want to have it be pretty simple and kind of rounded off. So maybe I want to be at 5,000 miles. So I'll bring it in here right to 5,000. So that's pretty good. So it's a pretty simple scale bar. It shows me a demarcation at 1,250, 2,500, and 5,000, which makes a lot of sense. And where you place this is really kind of up to you. They usually go down on the bottom. I think for this map, I'm going to keep it down close to the north bar here. Now, the last and final element that we want to have for this particular map is we want to make sure that your name's somewhere on here, so you could have another text field. So you would say map by. Let's just go ahead and do that together. So we're going to insert a new text, put him in the middle there, and I'm going to click off my map layer, bring him down, and under properties I might make it Arial 12. Okay, and I would just say map by and then my name. whatever your name is. Say OK. You might want to put a date in for your map. And we're keeping it within the box, the black box of the map edge here. Okay, so the last element that we're going to need is also a legend. And since we don't have all our data yet, we want to hold off on the legend to the very last. So we'll do that at the very last. So now that we have some elements on our map here, we want to go ahead and file, save this. So file, save. We're saving the MXD. We're not actually printing it yet. We're just saving the MXD. And what we're going to do now is we're going to actually go get our USGS hazards data. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and collapse this for a moment. And we're going to go back to USGS. And you'll have this link in the assignment itself. And you're welcome to use the data from the first week. If you want to start over and use more recent earthquake, a week more in advance, certainly feel welcome to do that. And in this case, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get all earthquakes that have a magnitude of 4.5. So instead of getting everything at 2.5, I'm going to get more substantial earthquakes at 4.5. And I'm going to have them be the past 30 days. Now I need to copy the start and end date. So I'm just going to copy this so I have it for my map title. So we started at 7/28 and we're going to 8/27. So if you just copy paste that, that's going to give you your start date and your end date for your actual data set. And that of course can go into your title. You can organize that into your title. So I'm just gonna collapse that for a moment. So once we actually have past 30 days, 4.5, our geographic scale is world. Under advanced options, what I can do is I can select what output I want. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to export as a CSV. GeoJSON and also KML would work for what we're doing for this assignment. But we're just going to go ahead and use CSV. And we'll go ahead and say search. And it gives us a query. So based on our inputs, it's giving us a query feature. And we'll open this up and put it on our desktop. And what we want to do, once it's on some location, we've downloaded it, we want to put it into our assignment 2 folder. And I'm going to name this a new folder, and I'm going to call this earthquake data _ data. So he's going to go in there, put him in. So now I'm all done with actually getting my data. I can go back into ArcGIS and I can point to that tabular data. So what we're going to do is go to Arc Catalog, and now if I refresh this, I go to Folder Connections, I can do a refresh, right-click Refresh, and then go into Assignment 2 Data, and I should see my folder. I'm not seeing it. Let me refresh it again. There it goes. So I did a right-click and I refreshed that folder in Arc Catalog, and now I can see that new folder, earthquake data. I'm going to go ahead and just simply drop this into my table of contents. And it comes in, it's not going to come in as points because it's just a table. It's just a CSV table right now. We have to do a couple things to actually get it to be points on the map. But like we did the first week, we can map this latitude and longitude, and instead of doing it with Google My Maps, we can do it in a GIS. So both QGIS and Esri handle this process really well. So if we go to a right-click and we say Display XY Data, if we have the columns already named latitude and longitude, it's going to pick up the right field. So for X field, it sees longitude, which is great. And for Y field, it also sees latitude. Now, we have many different options here. We need to make sure that we're in the right column. So once again, Y needs to be latitude, X needs to be longitude. And as long as we see WGS 1984, we know that's the latitude and longitude coordinate system that we should be mapping to. we should be able to produce our points. So we say OK. And this is giving us an alert that says, listen, in your current table, you don't have an object ID field. And so you're going to be restricted on what you can do. That's OK in this case. I just say OK. And it drops in my points. Now, when it drops in the points, it's producing what are called events. And these events, they don't really have what we would consider to be a stable geometry to them. We need to actually turn it into something that ArcGIS can recognize as a feature or a feature class. In this case, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take these points that are showing up on our map as events, and we're gonna actually save them as, in this case, we'll save it as a shapefile. So we do a right click and we go to Data and export the data. And we need to point it to not the default geodatabase, but we're going to go all the way to the top with our arrow tool and go into Folder Connections and go into Assignment 2 and into our Earthquake Data folder. And here is where we're going to drop down Save Type as Shapefile. And we want to call this, let's just call it Earthquake Points, or EQ_PTS for points, and say save and say OK. And we're going to add to the map. So we're going to get rid of these events now. We don't need this anymore, so we're going to remove that. And now we actually have points that are very mappable, and they have all the components that we need to utilize in GIS to do further mapping. So at this point, this map is starting to shape up pretty well. What we need to do is we need to symbolize these features, and we can symbolize them in several different ways. We could simply have a singular color. So right now we have kind of a pukey green here. Let's make it maybe a nicer green and make it bigger. So let's make a size 10 point. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Now remember, we need to think about map contrast and all the things that we talked about during class 2. That's decent. So we could definitely map this and just say that here's my global earthquakes from this date to that date, and here you see them on a map. We would also need to notate that they're 4.5 and above in terms of magnitude, because that's what we originally searched on. So one option besides just mapping as points, we can actually do what's called a proportional or graduated symbology, and that's going to actually represent the magnitude of the quake. So we can have small dots for small magnitude versus big dots for larger magnitude. So if I go to Properties now, I can go into Quantities, and under Quantities I can do a graduated symbology. And my value field is going to be magnitude. And it will give me a ranking from my 4s up into my 5s and 6s. So for this data set, the range is only 4.5 to 6.6. So let's simplify this. Let's have our classes be 3 classes. So we just are going to be 4.5 to 4.8, 4.8 to 5.4. And then 5.4 to 6.6 is the top. And under template, we can change that color. So let's have it be sort of a bright green. And the size, we can change the first size around to say, let's try 14. So that would be the template to start. We say apply, OK. And now we can see a difference in the actual sizes. The small dot seems to me to be getting lost. So I'm going to go back and try this, Properties, and let's bring it down from 4 to 10. And let's bring that up just a little bit. That seems too small. So you have to play with this a little bit to get it the way that you want it. Let's try 4 to 20, see what we get. Right. That that low first class is getting a little bit lost. So let's do it from, let's try 8 to 20 and see what we get. That's a little bit better. So we would need to play with this a bit to get it exactly the way that we want to have it. I also don't like the stroking on the edge. So if I click on edit symbol, I can get rid of this underneath my layers. I can click off that and just have the color and say, okay, apply it, okay. And that kind of gets rid of that stroking that's on the outside of the circle. So this is how you play with these points to get them visually to represent a proportional or graduated symbology that represents the different size of the earthquakes. And you get to that location by going to Properties. And once you're in Properties, you're at Quantities, Graduated Symbology. And you need to really spend some time in making this final map with getting this symbology ranking exactly the way that you want it to be. So it looks really crisp, sharp, and it has all the features of good map design that we talked about in class 2 before you actually produce the final map. For right now, I don't think that this is fantastic, but it's certainly good enough for the video purposes. So I'm just going to go ahead and say OK. And what we need to do now is save this because we've done some work, save it, and then we need to produce our final legend. And legends always relate to the map thematically. And in this case, you need to step back from your map for just a second and think about, what is this map about? Well, it's obviously global earthquakes. I'm showing some type of change in magnitude. And I'm showing a lot of these points. So I need to show in the legend the different classes, and I need to make sure that my title really reflects or really guides the viewer towards understanding the data. So what we need to do is we need to start with a default legend to begin with. And the way that we do that is we go up to Insert and say Legend. And the legend dialog here is that on the left-hand side are all the features that you see in the table of contents, and on the right-hand side is everything that's going to show up. What I like to do before going anywhere is just put everything back into the left-hand side and really think about what I want to see on the map. I don't really want to see the base map because the base map is so straightforward. It's obvious to the viewer that light gray equals land and blue equals ocean, that I'm not even, for this map, I don't think I'm going to even put that in. I could if I wanted to. I could put in ocean, but actually let's just do that. We'll just do it. So I'm just going to add in everything. So I have 3 layers. I'm just going to add them in, and I put them in. But you could easily leave those out, I think. What's really important for this map is the actual earthquake points themselves. And we say next. And the default title is just legend. From my perspective, I think having a legend called legend is a little bit repetitive, and I think that's considered to be the case by a lot of map users and a lot of map designers. So another option here is just to title this something that's thematic. So in this case, we could call it Global Earthquakes, or we could have it be earthquake locations. So it's slightly different than global earthquakes. Earthquake locations and magnitudes. That'd be a nice legend title. I'm not going to fancy this up. I'm just going to have it be basic Arial and say next. Now the border, from my perspective, I don't like backgrounds and border edges if I can avoid them. I have a nice white space here, so I'm just going to kind of leave it white, and I'd say next, next, and finish it up. Okay, so the titling here seems to be a bit big to me, so I can do a right click and go to Properties. And under General Title, I can go into Simple and change this around. So maybe make it 12 and say okay. It's a little bit small. Let's make it 14 or 16. That's fine. And now I'm okay with the way it's structured here, with the way the legend's structured, but I'm not happy with the way things are titled. So what I want to do is I want to go into my table of contents, and for EQ points, I'm just going to get rid of that altogether. I'm just going to take that off, and we can see what happens in my legend. It reflects that change. And under magnitude, I think I'll change it to actual titling of magnitude. I expect you to experiment with these table of contents and working up a format that you like. I don't like the way that it's expressed with all these zeros. So what I can do is I can click on the feature at the top here and go to properties, and under my symbol range and labeling, I can actually change the labeling. So here I would say 4.5 to 4.8, then 4.8 to 5.4, and that's okay. You don't necessarily have to have that one. There's a couple styles that people use to do these breaks, but I'm usually okay with going 4.8, next break 4.8, next break 5.4. That usually is okay, and we can apply it and say okay. So this simplifies, and we can see that we have 3 classes, and it's a really nice rounded clean number. So that's how you don't change the data that's actually in the attribute table, you're just changing the expression in the legend. And of course, this underscoring is not very palatable, so we want to go ahead and click on this titling, and we might just want to call it oceans and say okay. Personally, I think you could leave that out and just have earthquake magnitude, and this map legend would suffice very well. And then finally what we want to do is we want to, after we spent some time making a nice legend, is we want to go File, Save, and place this somewhere that makes sense. So if we place it over here, it bunches everything up in this corner, which isn't actually that bad. So that could be an option. Another way to do this would be to swing it over here and actually maybe have the source bar come over here. That looks halfway decent. But it's really up to you how you want to actually organize this bottom panel down here in the bottom. You have a lot of real estate in terms of negative space that you could produce a really nice legend. And I also have a legend video that talks about how to actually manipulate these legends in detail. So you want to make sure that you finesse your legend also. So the requirements for this map is that you're at a global scale, you're on an 11 by 17 sheet, you have a title, you have a map with your earthquake points that are symbolized through the magnitude. You're going to have a scale bar that's been designed, also a north arrow, and then a legend. Make sure that you include your map by and your name. And if you want to, you could put the class if you wanted to, but I think just having your name's fine. And also a source tag. You want to make sure that you're sourcing your data that's that you're using to compose this map. Once you have all your map features, then what you're going to do is go to File, Save. So we're saving the MXD, and then we need to finally compose a PDF that we're going to export out to our assignment submission. So we go to File, go to Export Map, and I'm going to put it into my assignment 2. So I'm going to make a new folder called Exports, so PDF Exports, _ Exports. And here is where class 2 map 1. It's taking the title's name and putting it in as the file name, which is fine. The resolution is going to be 300 dpi, and I'll say save. And then I can go ahead and take a look at my map that I just made. So PDF exports, and this will be the map. If I open this up, I can see what it looks like. And this is shaping up pretty well. We can see that our points are merging together. They're kind of becoming clumps, which is not that great. So I need to spend a little bit more time mapping my points and changing the size on the proportions, I think. But what's interesting about the map is that I can see that, one, there's a lot of earthquakes that are happening out in the middle of the ocean that are pretty sizable. I can see the pattern of where the earthquakes are happening, and I can see where there's spots where there's high magnitude versus some other earthquakes that are of a low magnitude. So the map's giving me a lot of information about these earthquake points that are inside the attribute table itself for the data. So this is our first map, and again we're doing a bleed of the page edge all the way out to the farthest edge. We're actually expanding that map frame out past the map page. That's how you get this nice clean boundary to the edge of the page. And then we have all our map elements that are surrounding the map page itself.